Hello there, I'm Nathalia Melo, your Unfiltered Fit BFF. Mom of two turned CEO of a fitness empire. Someone who truly understands the struggles of trying to stay fit, sane, and sexy, all while juggling work, life, and motherhood. And this is the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. Follow along wherever you're listening and join me weekly as I help busy working moms just like you simplify your fitness journey so you can lose fat, regain your confidence, and feel sexy AF. It's time to stop living in the what ifs and hiding from the cameras. It's time to regain control over your body, feel sexy naked, and wear a bikini confidently. People already see you as a super confident woman, but it's time for you to feel the same way too. Come on, let's go. Hello there, fam. Welcome to another episode of the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. I'm Nathalia Melo, your host, and today's topic is hot. Today, we're going to be talking about the big three, which is the name that I kindly gave to the three biggest influencers of fat loss and fat gain. And my goal for today's episode is to help you understand how sleep, stress, and hormones impact your fat loss journey. So we're going to be peeling all the layers and learning all about the impact that sleep, stress, and hormones have on your fat loss journey so you can make educated decisions and educated choices and have some level of agency as you are progressing or regressing on your fat loss journey and body composition journey. But before we talk all about stress, sleep, and hormones, I want to give a big shout out to Christina H., who sent me a fan mail. And if you don't know what fan mail is, you can send me one. If you go to the show notes, there is a link where you can send a fan mail, and I love receiving them. So if you have any feedback, any suggestions, anything that you want to tell me, that is an incredible way of doing it. And here's what Christina said. I just listened to your podcast 92 from March 11th, and it was great. I have been making great strides lately in my health and fitness consistency, and this was just what I needed to continue to tweak my current routines. My aha moment was when you said to treat my health and fitness the same way I treat my career and parenting. I have sought out many different support for work and parenting, but not so much for health. This is my next step. Thank you for what you do. All the best, Christina H. Well, Christina, if you're listening to this episode, thank you very, very much. Christina is from, and I'm going to apologize in advance to all our Canadian friends because I am likely to butcher the pronunciation of this, but you cannot blame me because it is not easy. So Christina H. is from Saskatchewan. I think I got this maybe like 50% right. So Christina, thank you. If anybody's listening and wants to send me a fan mail, make sure you click that button down below. And let's go straight to today's episode, which is all about the big three. And, you know, it's interesting. What really got me to talk about this today was obviously we work with female professionals who have very demanding careers, have very busy lives. I talk a lot on social media with women who also live the same busy life, demanding life. And I always saw that there was a pattern on the sleep, stress, and hormonal conversation. But what really pushed me to record this podcast today was that, I don't know if you guys know, but here we are. I do a lot of speaking in corporate settings and attorneys' offices and accounting offices. And this past week, I did a presentation in what is called AM 100 law firm, which if you don't know, AM 100 are the top 100 law firms in the country. And this particular one that I went is in the top 60. And these law firms have a lot at stake. So the attorneys and staff working in them have very, very, very demanding careers. And leading up to my presentation, I sent a survey And what I noticed is that repeatedly, what kept on coming up was stress, sleep, hormones, stress, sleep, hormone. Like you was a theme. And I was like, huh. So on my first half of the presentation, I made it a lot about helping women understand the impact of stress, lack of sleep, and hormonal fluctuation in their bodies. And I feel that this is a big important part that has been missing whenever we are talking, and not just on corporate setting on a law firm but just the educational piece for women to better understand the impact, and not in a way to make women feel defeated of being like, oh, I'm stressed with work and I haven't slept very well and my hormones are all over the place and that's it. Like, because all of this is happening, I cannot lose weight. No, the reason why I want to provide this information in a very simplified manner is to help women around the world understand that, yes, there are impacts from big three, but there is still a layer of agency that can be utilized to mitigate the negative impact of lack of sleep, hormonal fluctuation, the stress, and all of that. And that is what I want to discuss today, is to give you back your agency on doing what you can, instead of just accepting that because things are stressful, you're not going to be able to get results, because that is not true. And the thing for me is that I'm always hearing, oh, I'm in a calorie deficit, but stress is making me gain weight. There is a lot of misinformation, or, I've been sleeping terribly and now I'm gaining fat, even though I'm doing everything the same. Or my hormones are out of whack and I can't lose weight. And don't get me wrong, like I said before, sleep, stress, and hormones absolutely impact your body composition. But there's the one thing that nobody talks about, is that they don't break the laws of thermodynamics. Because whenever you open social media, there is like, oh, you shouldn't care about your calories. You should care about your hormones. No, hold on a second. It's not one or the other. They work together. Hormones or sleep or stress, they don't override something that is called energy balance. They influence it. And what usually is happening is that stress, poor sleep, or hormonal fluctuations change how you behave, how you move, how hungry you are, what you crave, and how you recover. And that is what is impacting the results. So in today's episode, we're really going to be breaking down what I call the big three of fat loss and how they influence your energy balance without you even realizing. And the first thing that we need to understand is energy balance. Okay. So how does fat loss, fat gain, and weight maintenance happens? There is something called CICO, CICO, which stands for calories in and calories out. So in order for fat loss to exist, a calorie deficit needs to be present. A lot of times you might not be able to see that number so objectively on the scale, because there might be some water retention and muscle development and things like that. But in order to lose fat, you must be in a caloric deficit. If you are, oh, I'm in a calorie deficit, but my weight is actually going up, you are not. Especially if it is something that is being consistently happening. Now, what is the other way? You have what is called a caloric surplus. Caloric surplus is whenever you're consuming more calories than what you burn. And that is when fat gain happens. Okay. And then you have what is called calorie maintenance, which is basically whenever the amount of calories that you're consuming and the amount of calories that you're burning, they are the same. Now that we understand how fat loss happens, let's start talking about the big three, because it's all going to start to come together now. Let's start with sleep, because I really feel like sleep is the one that almost like has a trickle-down effect on the other two. So sleep, which I like to call the silent saboteur, disrupts your hunger and satiety hormones. Hunger hormone being ghrelin in your fullness hormone being leptin. So whenever you're sleep deprived, your ghrelin and your leptin levels are a bit out of whack. And what that means is that your body is not communicating very well with itself on when you stop being hungry and when you're full. So you just kind of like eat. This is also very common whenever you are in a very aggressive caloric deficit. This is, particularly common with people that do bodybuilding competitions because they have restricted themselves so much. And that deregulation of ghrelin and leptin is not due to sleep deprivation, but it's kind of the same mechanism. So what happens then? You're more likely to consume more calories, aka calories in. Whenever you're sleep deprived, there is also another thing that happens, which is you become lethargic. So if you have low energy, if you are lethargic, you are a lot more likely to move much less, and you're more likely to skip a workout. You are more likely to, even if you show up for the workout, it's not the best workout. And even like from being animated standpoint, if you could see me now, I'm like, my hands are flopping around and stuff like that. You can see that when somebody is more sleep deprived, they don't move as much. They're not as animated. They're very slow. And that conserves calories, meaning there is a decline on calories out. All right. Another thing that sleep does is that it deregulates your impulse control, your emotions, your mood. So if there is a low impulse control, there is a much bigger likelihood of emotional snacking, craving. And one thing that I always say is that I don't know many people who, whenever they're craving, especially from being sleep deprived, that they crave an apple. You know what? I'm so sleep deprived. Give me an apple. Celery sticks sound amazing right now. No. Whenever you are sleep deprived and your impulse control and your craving up to the roof and your self-control is non-existent, you're going to go for the sleeve of Oreos. You're going to go for the chips. And another thing that happens whenever you're sleep deprived is that there is poor recovery. So whenever there is poor recovery, there is higher inflammation. And whenever there is inflammation, there is water retention. So that's why I don't know if anybody has done this, and I don't recommend it. I used to do a lot of this because I was a psycho when I competed, and it was not good for my mental health. But I remember when I was competing that if I had a bad night's sleep, my weight would go up like a couple pounds overnight. And my nutrition was basically the same. And then after having a good night's sleep, my weight would go down like 3 or 4 pounds. And the reason for that is that inflammation and that water retention that happens when you are sleep deprived. So this is how sleep impacts fat loss. So how can we regain some level of agency whenever we're talking about the sleep piece? I know that is a lot easier said than done. I want to rephrase it with that. But being intentional about having a bedtime routine. Ideally speaking, perfect scenario, anywhere between 7 and 9 hours sleep. Again, I do understand that is a lot easier said than done. Avoiding screens. But in a more practical level, if you are in a season where there is a lot of demand with your career, and if you are a mom with a newborn, or if you're a grandma who is helping your grown child with a baby, all of that, there are a lot of reasons why sleep can be disrupted. Things that you can do is making sure that you are hitting your step goals, making sure that you are sticking to your nutrition and you're properly tracking your food so that what I like to call the BLTs don't sneak in. BLTs stand for buy, licks, and taste. You know, like whenever you're walking in the office and the office cookie jar is there, you just grab a little bit and then you don't really track it because, it's just a little bit. But if you walk near that jar 5 times, it's a handful that you grab every single time. and those calories add up. So you are going to need to be a little bit extra mindful of your caloric consumption so you are not mindlessly eating and you are able to actually track how many calories you're consuming. These are some strategies that you can deploy to mitigate and better manage that caloric consumption and also the output from what is called NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which would be where your step count would be a very good tool of something to track to make sure that you're staying active. Now, let's go to the second of the big three, which is stress. And I like to call this the undercover saboteur. So here are ways in which stress messes with your body composition. First one is whenever you're stressed, a lot of people tend to skip meals. And then whenever they do eat, they overeat. And then they beat themselves up because like, oh my God, I have no willpower. And I'm like, girl, like, how would you? You've been starving yourself all day and you've been making decisions and having self-control to not tell people to fuck off. So you're tapped out on your willpower. Then whenever you get home and there is no food ready, it's whatever, man. So the skipping meals and overeating later and trying to rely on your willpower or self-control or discipline or whatever the hell you want to call, that is a pattern of behavior that a lot of people fall into. And whenever you overeat later, what happens? The calories in significantly increase. The other way in which stress impacts body composition and energy balance, there is more emotional eating, stress eating, and food becomes comfort, distraction. And just like I mentioned before with the sleep, that whenever you are emotionally eating or using food as a coping mechanism, I don't know people who use an apple or a banana or a protein shake as their coping mechanism. It's normally going to be highly palatable food, highly processed food, which are highly palatable and highly caloric. It's very easy to eat a bag of chips when you're stressed and you are emotionally eating. And there are a lot of calories there. So you are increasing your caloric consumption. With stress, there is always an increase of inflammation due to increased cortisol. Your cortisol levels go up, which, just for the record, stress is not inherently bad. Just for the record. The problem is when it's something that you are chronically stressed. That's when it starts to become problematic. And cortisol also can impact how fat is distributed in your body, because a lot of the cortisol receptors are on your abdominal area. So a lot of the fat, you might still weigh the same, but it can be redistributed. And it is going to be more stored around your abdominal area. And also, whenever you're stressed, it disrupts your sleep. And we have already established how sleep deprivation impacts energy balance, the calories out and the calories in. You feel lethargic. You don't move as much. Also, whenever people are stressed, some people cope with stress by training and working out and doing all of that, but that is not the norm for most people. So whenever they're stressed, many times it's because they have a lot on their plate. They're overwhelmed. So the first thing to fall to the wayside is physical activity, which then declines calories out. And we can even think about back to the pandemic. A lot of people gained a significant amount of weight. I think the data says that during COVID, people gained 20, 25 pounds. Don't quote me on this data, but I'm pretty sure I read somewhere, but I want to double check. And the reason for that is a lot of people start working at home. So whenever you're working at home, you're not moving as much. So there is a decline of calories out. And then you have the stress associated with it. When are things going to go back to normal? When am I going to lose my job? Like, is my health okay? And then there is an increase in calories in. So are we starting to see the picture there on how it all comes together? So how can you mitigate the negative impact of stress in your physical activity, in your body composition, in your mental health even? First thing that I highly recommend is to get your workouts done first thing in the morning. And here, it does not have to be perfect. It does not have to be the best workout of your life, but it is about keeping things consistent. And let's say that you are someone who trains 5 days a week, but you are in a very stressful season of life. Reduce that to 3 times a week, in even if it is 15 minutes. Keeping that momentum is going to allow you to resume what you perceive to be your normal physical activity whenever that stressful situation goes away. And there is also a lot of data that supports that people are a lot more likely to manage stress better and to make better food decisions, aka the calories in, whenever they are exercising. So making sure that you get some kind of physical activity first thing in the morning, it's also going to help you mitigate the stress, because what happens is if you leave at the end of the day and it is something that is important to you, but life is busy, you're thinking about it the whole day, and it just adds more stress to an already stressful season of life. So getting your workouts first thing in the morning doesn't have to be perfect. Reduce, like if you don't have time to do 3 rounds, do 2 rounds. If you don't have time to do 2 rounds of whatever your workout is, do 1. If you don't have time to go to the gym, do it at home, but keep that momentum going. The other one is be very intentional about your caloric intake and planning for the week. That is going to set you up for success. And what I feel a lot of people don't understand is the snowball effect that the lack of planning has on stress, because then you start to feel like a failure. You're like, see, and I'm like going home and I'm stressed and I don't have anything ready. So I'm just going to stop and get some fast food here because it's easy and convenient. Whether if you already have something that is more aligned with your goals prepped, it removes that layer of stress, that like beating yourself up. So getting your workout first thing in the morning and adjust that to the season of life that you are for that particular moment, and plan and outsource stuff. If you don't have even time to meal prep because you're getting DoorDash or whatever, outsource it. Get it from a meal prep company. I personally recommend Icon Meals. I'm going to drop a link down in the description. And full disclosure, I've been using Icon Meals since they first started. I have been to their facilities, incredibly clean. That's the one that I use. That's the one I recommend to our clients in the Powerhouse Academy. That's an option. Meal prep company. Getting someone to meal prep for you, that is another option as well. Asking for help in your house from your spouse. So there are ways in which this particular situation can be mitigated so that there isn't so much of a negative impact on your physical health, emotional health, and in your body composition ultimately. And then the last one of the big 3 is hormones. And this is a conversation that a lot of women have. It's kind of like, oh, it's my hormones. I'm gaining weight. I'm gaining weight because of my hormones. Right. But we need to understand the mechanism in which it happens, because hormones are going to, fluctuate, especially as we age. So if we just accept and succumb and it is what it is, then what agency do we have over our own bodies? And it's kind of the same thing with stress. There's always going to be stress. Some seasons more stressful than others, but hoping for the absence of stress is not a realistic expectation of life, especially if you have a career, if you have kids, if you have aging parents. It's just a part of life. So we need to learn how to navigate these different things that are happening. So back to hormones. what happens when your hormones start to get all funny and shit? There is an increase in hunger and cravings, and your sleep also gets impacted. So if there is an increase in hunger and craving, what happens? There is an increase in calories in. If you're struggling to sleep, even when you're exhausted, or your sleep is being disrupted because you're experiencing hot flashes, what is going to happen? You're going to feel more lethargic, because we have already established the trickle-down effect that lack of sleep or sleep disruption has on body composition. So that's another thing that happens. You also have energy crashes that not only come from the hormonal fluctuation from, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, but also from the ghrelin and leptin disruption from the lack of sleep. So there's going to be less movement, skipped workouts, aka less calories out. And there is also mood swings, which are a byproduct of the lack of sleep, and also the fluctuation of estrogen and progesterone, which have a huge impact on mood regulation. So if you have the mood swings and there is the brain fog, there is the lack of clarity, and the testosterone dip also can lead to a lack of motivation, what happens there? It can just lead to emotional eating, which is already being topped with the sleep disruption. So do you see how it all brings things back to the energy balance part of the equation? So all these things are happening, okay? And whenever we're talking about your perimenopausal and menopausal hormones fluctuation, it starts to become a little bit more complex. However, one thing that we need to understand is that there is a level of agency that you have. Because what happens a lot of times is that women will let the lack of motivation of a few days because they're sleep deprived, or because their hormones are really making them have a bigger brain fog and they're less motivated, and they don't show up at all. And then they miss one day, and then they miss another day, and they miss another day. And then they completely lose that consistency. And then they don't show up. And then they stop weightlifting. There is no strength training. And then they start to gain weight. And what they don't realize is that that weight gain and that lack of physical activity by default is also going to have a negative impact on their perimenopausal and menopausal symptoms. Because, for example, if you have more fat, especially, around your abdominal area, there is going to be a higher chance of more intense hot flashes. Why? Because now you have that addition of fat cells that hold on to heat. So it always starts to become a trickle-down effect. So my suggestion, and that's what we do with a lot of our members, is to show up doing what you can. Because the moment that you keep on showing up consistently, you are setting yourself up for success. Even if it is, I'm just showing up for one round, one set for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And obviously there are other solutions that you can discuss with your healthcare provider, about hormone replacement therapy and things like that. But that is outside my scope. So I would default that to the healthcare providers. But I would highly encourage women who are experiencing a lot of hormonal fluctuation to keep track of their symptoms. Because a lot of times these hormonal fluctuations are really challenging to just see in blood work. And the best diagnosis a lot of times is going to be with a list of symptoms and the frequency in which the symptoms are happening. But what you can do is to keep on paying attention to your caloric intake, to be intentional about movement instead of sitting down in a chair all day, because there is data also that supports, people always look and they're like, oh, whenever you age, you gain weight. But there is data and there is evidence that weight gain comes from the lack of physical activity and movement. So if you keep on moving and you keep on being intentional about, setting alarms on your phone, hey, get up and walk every hour or so. And it doesn't have to be a long walk. Maybe do a lap around the block and come back. Or if you work in a big office, do a lap around the office. If you work in an office that is on, the second floor, take the stairs instead of the elevator. These are small things that you can do to ensure that you're keeping movement and you're not following the pattern of the standard that is expected of whenever your hormones are fluctuating, then you're just like, oh, that's it. That's the hormones. No, if you still show up and do something, you're going to have a much better chance of giving yourself agency to control what is controllable. And one thing that you can control is how you show up, how you eat. Even if your hormones are acting funny and are telling you to eat Oreos instead of eat the meal that you prep, you are a lot more likely to default to the meal that is more aligned with your goals if you have prepped that. If you don't have that and there is a box of cookies, you're going to go for the box of cookies because you don't have the meal aligned with your goals sitting right there. So there are ways for you to mitigate and to have agency on what can be controlled. Here's what I want you to leave with. Just saying, oh, I'm doing everything the same isn't always enough. If you're not tracking, you might feel like your food and workouts haven't changed. But stress, poor sleep, or hormones could be silently shifting your behavior and kind of like become that story of the frog. And I think I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell again. If you listen, I'm telling it again. It's kind of like the story of the frog. Whenever the frog is put in a pot of water and then the pot water is starting to get heated up. And the frog doesn't realize that the water is getting hot and is almost to a boil. So whenever the water is boiling, it's too late for the frog to jump out. And that's what can happen with a lot of people when they start to become complacent. I'm going to use as an example. Let's say that you start something at 160 pounds, just for example. And then you go up to 163. And it's like, oh, it's just 3 pounds. I can totally manage that. And then time goes by and 163 becomes your normal. And then you gain 3 more pounds and now you're at 166. And you're like, oh, it's just 3 pounds. I can manage it. But the reality is that it's not just 3 pounds, it's 6 because your starting point was 160, but you allowed yourself to make the 163 your new set point. And then you're 166 and then you gain 5 pounds because let's say summer came. And then now you're 171. And you're like, oh my goodness, 5 pounds. Well, 5 pounds is not that bad. But what you don't realize is that really it's not 5 pounds, it's 11 pounds. Because whenever you started this whole shenanigans, you were at 160. That is why it is important to be cognizant and to be very intentional and not become complacent. Pay attention to your energy output, like, your steps, your movements, your intentionality with going for a walk. Are you feeling more lethargic? Are you sitting on the couch more? What about your cravings? And I'm not saying that you are not to eat the Oreos. I love Oreos. I love ice cream. But are you appropriately tracking those? Or is it just becoming something that is more an emotional coping mechanism? Because if it is, it needs to be tracked and we need to understand what's happening. What about your hunger cues and portion sizes? Are you properly tracking those? Because if your hunger cues are a bit off and you're feeling more hungry, it might be that you need to drink a little bit more water. That might help. But we don't know if we're not being objective and tracking it. And what happens with a lot of people is that they would just go, oh, it's my hormones. But is it though? Because there might be things that we can do to mitigate it. And even your meal consistency. If you're skipping meals, there is a big chance that you're going to overeat later. So this is why it's very important to track or keep some kind of diary of your physical activity and how you feel. And that is also going to help you if you are perimenopausal and menopausal to bring to your healthcare provider's appointment and show symptoms that you are experiencing. And one thing that I want to highlight here is that this isn't about blaming yourself. This isn't about beating yourself up. It's about setting you up for success by getting honest with your inputs and what is truly happening. You can only adjust what you know. You can only take back control of what you see that is out of control. That is the only way that you're finally going to be able to start to see results again. And don't try to do all at once, but pick one of the big three to focus on this week and to be mindful and intentional. Okay, so I'm not sleeping well. Am I noticing a change in my hunger pattern? How am I responding to it? Am I setting myself up for success by having my meals ready instead of constantly relying on willpower? And then I end up eating McDonald's because that's the easiest thing on my way to work or my way back home. So once you start to put the pieces back together, it starts to give you more agency, and you can only have agency over what you understand. And that's why I wanted to really show you how the big three impact energy balance, because this isn't just about, oh, hormones are doing this, lack of sleep are doing this. It's about understanding how they are doing it and how you can control. And it's funny because we have a member who is 61. And whenever she came to us, her name is Cindy. And I'm going to say her name because I know she's cool with it. Cindy was training like 7 days a week and eating like very, very little. And she couldn't shift the weight. Couldn't shift it. And it's like, oh, that's it. Like I've always been fit, but now the weight just keep on piling up. And the more I work out, the worse it gets. And she's been working with us for about 4 or 5 months. And she's eating, and she's tiny. She's a tiny person. I think she's 4'11". She's eating 1,700 calories. She's training about 30% of the total amount that she used to train before. So she's training 70% less because before she was spending 2 hours in the gym, 7 days a week. So now we're making the workouts more intentional. She is able to sleep better. Everything is getting appropriately tracked. I'm telling you this story for you to see how important tracking and intentionality is relevant through change, and also for you to see that it is possible. That's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy. Let me know what you think. Send me a message on Instagram. If you have any feedback, I would love to hear from you. And if you have any questions, send me a message on the fan mail. And I cannot wait to see you next week. Thank you so much for listening. Adios. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. But let me ask you, what was your aha moment in today's episode? I would love to know. You can leave me a comment at the link in the show description. You can also follow me on social media, Instagram. Links are down below as well. And let me know what topics you want to hear more about or who I should have on the show. This is it for today, guys. I'll see you back next week for another episode of the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast.